Colonize Space Now. An ebook by Hector V. Bello. Part 1. A few rationales for colonizing space. This book was written in June 2015 in Vestavia Hills, Alabama, USA, and Byron, Georgia, USA. Chapter 0. Introduction. A planet is the cradle of mind, but one cannot live in a cradle forever. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. Colonize, occupy, inhabit, move into, immigrate, live in. All of these words may bring to mind familiar sights and sounds of land, sea, blue skies, vegetation, rectangular home structures, and perhaps animals and foods. But this small ebook is a treatment to the possible occupation of another kind of environment, one that may appear a wonderful and distantly hopeless dream to many. Space. What is wrong with Earth, you ask? It seems to be able to comfortably sustain a large percentage of today's people, if not all of us, right? And it even may sustain all animals and plants that people may need for thousands of years to come. To be fair, these are legitimate arguments to combat any answer to the original question, but these arguments miss important points. It is not about living space, comfort, or the resources available in the next 1,000 years. It is about intellectual expansion, about finding answers, about assuring our survival, and spawning a new horizon. These are worth the discomfort, sacrifice, and other hardships that are likely to follow any pursuit in deep space. This small ebook argues that moving a small but growing percentage of our population to deep space and beyond can open up a Pandora's box of possibilities, many of which we still can't even imagine. But for those possibilities that we can imagine and are even likely, this ebook is an attempt to briefly showcase those. This ebook draws on some of the concepts of pioneers of space exploration, travel and colonization, and on the core arguments and proposals of those individuals. And this ebook will bring some of those older arguments to modern perspectives when possible, and include some other rather original arguments that may have been missed by space colonization pioneers. This work is by no means a technical manual of how to colonize space, nor is it a blueprint of the technologies required to do so. Such undertaking would require a miniature space program. Instead, this ebook is 1. An overview of some important arguments for space colonization, 2. A brief view of space colonization proponents and propositions, and 3. An overview and critique of those propositions. Some of my critiques will be embedded throughout the ebook and will bring up the pros and cons of each proposition and or concept discussed. Also, I attempt to gauge how likely the others and my propositions are to materialize given the necessary support. Lastly, this 3-part ebook focuses on the elementary concepts of space colonization proposals, such as ship and habitat designs. The permanent space presence or space colony I advocate in this ebook is a relatively modest one. Unlike the monster space colonies called for since the mid-1970s, I support an initial colony of modular construction, primarily for manufacturing and research. This space colony would not be a rotating colony, but one resembling the International Space Station, or ISS, on steroids. My space colony would house many hundred space folk who work and do research in space. The colony would be large enough and capable of large-scale manufacturing for a variety of projects, space construction or manufacturing projects. This colony would support our deep spacecraft, power stations, and other more advanced space colonies. Here, I attempted to separate current facts from distant dreams and broadly place our civilization in the current context of space colonization, highlighting what we can achieve now. I believe this ebook offers a great introduction material for those interested in the colonization of space, deep space travel, and all related technologies and career fields. And it should provide a jumping off point for further research and discovery. Chapter 1. Why Space? The only source of knowledge is experience. Albert Einstein. A legitimate, simple, and brutally probing question is, why bother? Before I begin to answer, try asking the same question to many of the things you already enthusiastically do, and at many instances you will find them hard to answer satisfactorily. Why do you learn? Why do you watch TV? Why do you earn money? Many seemingly necessary acts may be hard to justify when thoroughly investigated. For example, why learn? Simple. To know more, right? Well, that's not a thorough answer. If you answer, to know more so that I can do more in life, it is closer to a thorough answer, but it is still vague. The same with work, love, exercising, having fun, helping others, etc. So there is a seemingly infinite amount of answers, each more complete to virtually any question. Even answers to yes/no questions can always be followed by because. So, why space? Well, several thousand reasons, but there's just a few highlight reasons this book will cover, all of which are often brought up by space advocates. Because 1. It is a stepping stone to the stars. 2. To discover for the betterment of mankind on Earth and space. 3. To provide assurance of continued human survival and expansion. 4. As a source of still unknown discoveries. 5. For chances to find other life. 6. For expanded energy sources. 7. For a chance to become other life, evolution, and do more. This part of this ebook will focus on these reasons for going to and staying in space. These reasons are briefly introduced in the following few paragraphs. Baby steps to the stars. I believe that slowly moving into space will allow us to go far and eventually to other stars far. The difference between going to space now and remaining here, putting it off for later, is like between a person merely looking out from a beach and a person on a ship at sea looking out to the vast ocean. Who do you think is more able to go explore and find something that will impact humanity? As a species, going to space and living there will put us in a better position to build the technologies that will take us to deep space and make life better here on Earth and in space. Discovery for the betterment of mankind. Space exploration and will continue to Space exploration has and will continue to put us in a track to discover new materials, resources, and technologies that will benefit Earth and space inhabitants. Solar, photovoltaic panels, smaller computers, and better building methods are just a few of the improvements passed down to us by space program research. By establishing not only a mere space program, but a deep space program, many more discoveries should be expected. Assurance of continued survival and expansion. Colonizing space will give us a better chance to survive and expand as a species. This is especially true when considering many thousands of years as the time scale, the fast-growing human population, dwindling Earth resources, and the rapidly warming global climate. Professors Michio Kaku and Stephen Hawking, for example, support the idea of a two-planet species, among many other scientists, precisely because of the threats to human survival. Unknown discovery and possibilities. Yes, the unknown can be a good argument for colonizing space, in my view. Surely, in our past, it was uncertain for many a hunter-gatherer group of what awaited them on the other side of the mountain. Some stayed back and some went, and many surely died on both sides of the mountain. But those that went and survived surely discovered a new world and used their new resources with the knowledge brought from their homeland. So perhaps, as many times as not, there is something good awaiting in the unknown. Other life. We may finally be able to answer the age-old question of whether we are alone in the universe. Earth-originated robotic missions and radio and telescope observations have many limitations that can be overcome by boots on the ground or flyby exploration. For example, microscopic or life traces of past life may be eluding us at Mars and other places because of our human non-presence in those places. Energy. As introduced in the 1970s, the prospects of tapping into much vaster and powerful sources of energy are deep in space. Uninterrupted solar energy and energy from cosmic sources yet unknown, and energy sources of relatively nearby asteroids and planets can provide space humans with an abundance of energy. Evolution. Finally, evolution is arguably a great reason for us to break off into deep space. A new breed of human will likely arise from the vastly different demands of space living. The lower, higher, or non-existent gravity of space environments will surely and eventually evolve space-dwelling humans to the point of becoming a new species. Diet, air pressure, and radiation levels are just a few of the many other factors that may evolve humans to a separate species. In summary, reasons to go to space are almost too many, and in time many begin to become boring as the advantages of space exploration continue to stack up as we colonize space. The space exploration that we have performed as a species in the last 60 years has provided us with countless benefits. Look them up. Just imagine what the next 60 years of discovery could yield, and the next, if the rate of exploration and our presence in space folded by many times. Chapter 2. Gazing at the sky. The beginning is the most important part of the work. Plato. Since recorded history over 5,000 years ago, people have studied the skies above them. Surely the study of the heavens occurred, albeit in a simpler manner, many thousands of years before that. As many animals are drawn to the moonlight and moved by other signs in the sky, such as thunder, rain, stars, comets, eclipses, etc., so we were moved to study the sky and try to understand it. As mentioned in the series Cosmos, before there was a TV and digital handheld devices to take our attention, there was the starry sky. A full starry night sky with no city lights to block it, is one that is a rarity and a delight to behold. This rarity of the full night is due to the lighting of the many cities we live in. Recently, I saw a very realistic simulated full night sky in a planetarium, and I was moved in wonder. Surely my far ancestors felt similarly. The earliest city-states in the Mesopotamian river basins of over 5,000 years ago have records of studies of the sky, forms of early astronomy. Their search to connect with the sky is likely to be the source of our religious and scientific want to be part of the heavens. The heavens has for a long time been the source of much good and ill in our reality, and in the minds of most of us, the sky became the cause of many of our defeats and triumphs, bringing both fortune and catastrophe, as moderate sunshine and rain brings abundance, and too much of the same brings droughts and floods. Our ancestors surely must have looked for answers up in the sky, and with much reason. Perhaps this same zeal follows us to modern times, to want to go there and be part of it. There have been countless people that, with the realization of a greater universe, have wondered about the other possible worlds, and our possibility to travel far away from Earth, and even stay out there and live. Standing tall among them are the Dark Ages philosophers Giordano Bruno and Johannes Kepler. Bruno, on his realization of the vastness of the universe, tried to convince others of it, but he was largely alone on his belief and eventually caused his persecution by the people and authorities of his time. Kepler attempted to innocently promote science by writing a story of travel to the moon, finding himself also persecuted by closed-minded crowds around him. Ancient cultures looked up at the sky and somehow saw the potential to go live among the stars. Some people believed the journey to the stars to be corporeal, some inanimate, yet others believed it to be a consensus of the two. For example, the Sumerians, inventors of the all-important wheel, believed that the universe consisted of a flat disk enclosed by a dome, and after death people traveled and stayed in a netherworld to spend eternity as a Geddon or ghost. The Egyptian buried their deceased pharaohs, kings, with a replica of a royal barge as a homage to the god king, and also to guarantee his safe ascent to the heavens. The Old Testament tells us of an out-of-this-world journey where Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven, and there is a reference to a purported celestial flying object in the story of Ezekiel, when a mysterious craft appears from the sky and lands near a river in Chaldea, part of ancient Babylonia. Since antiquity, it seems there is the mark of a wish for humans to travel into the bliss of the heavens and stay there indefinitely. It was not until after the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century that thinkers began to ponder of the possibility of going to space with the help of machines. There are countless reasons why the heavens are cited time and again as the home of one or more gods, and the future home of those deserving to live among them. The imposing presence of a full moon in the horizon, and the unexpected eerie spectacle of a solar eclipse, and the unusual appearance of a bearded or tailed star, a comet, must have amazed and bedazzled our ancestors. Still does today. Thus, events of the heavens must have influenced our ancestors to believe the sky to be a place of bliss and awesome power. So, the want to be a part of the heavens is a strong urge among us still. Astrology the precursor to astronomy, was practiced by the ancient Chinese, in fact, by many other civilizations, at least since the beginning of writing. At first, the sky was a vital tool to predict, therefore prepare for, the different seasons. But with astrology, the sky soon became a matter of everyday happenings for all on Earth, even unrelated things such as sickness. The Greeks of the ancient world placed their gods in high up places, including mountaintops, clouds, and the starry heavens, often naming the planets after the gods: Jupiter, Venus, Saturn, etc. The Romans also followed similar customs and placed many other gods in the sky, for example Mars and Aeolus. Many of the modern day religions assume the heavens as the ultimate place for all deserving humans. So, going to the heavens for reasons of abundance, peacefulness, justice, and lasting life in different ways drive our scientific efforts to go to space. Even the search for life in space may be a branch out of our confidence that those that live in the heavens, our eagerness to belong, not to be alone, and to defy death, accompany us in our most stretching efforts to reach far into space. Ultimately, if space colonization is successful, it may be us that live in the heavens and watch over Earth. Chapter 3: Baby Steps to the Stars. The true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. Albert Einstein. I believe in gradual growth, taking baby steps before you run. Crawling first, slow gain, has proven to be, time and again, the best and most thorough way to do almost anything. From charging a battery to learning a craft, slow gain is almost always best. So, I believe slowly moving into space will allow us to build a firm foundation for us to later leap into deep space. Unlike our current pace of space exploration, which is more like taking naps between each baby step, we need slow but steady advance, and, like a tree trunk, the thicker it is, the further up it can grow. So, slow, steady growth can allow humans to venture further into deep space. Slow and steady growth will enable us to build very large and intricate infrastructure, which is needed for deep space travel. I believe we must build our foundation starting now so that we can begin to be ready in 1 or 2 decades. We must not continue to look at each other and say we could be there now. Richard Zubrin avidly supports a deep space exploration program that gets things done within 1 decade. But Zubrin's plan is just the start of a long and steady effort to colonize other worlds. It may seem a bit pretentious to claim that a baby step is actually establishing space colonies, but if the ultimate aim is star travel, space colonies surely are baby steps. In a broad view of space colonization, space colonies are only the beginning of our efforts. Initially, space colonies I and others advocate can either orbit around Earth or be on the ground as solar lower gravity moon, or be on the ground of a solar lower gravity moon or planet. We must colonize space to be able to expand beyond our solar system, because Earth's gravity makes most every space pursuit many times as hard and costly. Gerard O'Neill and a variety of other Ivy League and NASA scientists performed a study in the mid-1970s about the feasibility of space-based habitat. During the study, it was found that Earth is actually a pretty inconvenient place for a rapidly expanding technological civilization, and this location disadvantage was due to Earth's changing weather and air pressures, relatively high gravity, and natural processes such as erosion, tectonic plates shifts, volcanism, hurricanes, and many other natural occurrences. Examples of these natural processes are the 2004 and 2011 Northern Pacific tsunamis and the 2005 tropical hurricane Katrina, all of which caused large numbers of deaths and many billions of dollars in damage and the destruction of infrastructure that will take decades to rebuild. It is counterintuitive to call our home, Earth, as inadequate for progress. After all, we evolved to comfortably live on its atmosphere exclusively, right? For example, if you go up the Earth's atmosphere only a few miles and down a few meters from the surface, it is naturally uninhabitable. So, living on the Earth's surface would appear to be the best option for any human civilization, but not according to the 1975 summer study. The study's findings are easy to understand when posing the question just a bit differently. Under what circumstances can a technical civilization advance most unimpeded? The answer? Not on the surface of the Earth. For example, if you had Earth humans and space-based humans as two separate civilizations with no contact with each other, and both had all the resources needed to advance technologically, which civilization do you believe would outpace the other in strides? In basic terms, the 1975 study found the answer: the space-based civilization. All of the artificial conditions provided in an advanced space colony would be specifically designed for human comfort and the optimal technological advancement for that human civilization, thus virtually allowing for advance in all areas at neck-breaking speeds. Space colonies would have a completely controllable atmosphere, high technology, and a lack of gravitational pull where needed. These and the dwellings purposely built structural shapes, which would mostly depend on use, would contribute to technological advance. In fact, advance would not stop in technology. It would likely spread to other areas of civilization like art, health, economics, culture, etc. Advance in other areas would be possible because of the rapid advance in technology. I believe a space colony will act as a jumping-off point to better everything. Space colonies would be irreplaceable locations for manufacturing spacecraft, processing raw materials, and manufacturing many types of goods for space and Earth. For example, the 1975 summer study proposed space colonies primarily for the manufacture of space-based energy plants or power satellites, PowerSats for short, which would work with solar light concentrators to produce usable electrical energy. Manufacturing uses for space colonies could be near-perfect ball bearings, high-quality crystals, semiconductor wafers, 3D printers, and a variety of other products. The 1975 summer study based the existence of space colonies as power plant manufacturing facilities, which at the time began to appear as a viable way to prevent another U.S. energy crisis. Today, with renewable energy technologies able to completely replace the use of fossil fuels, the rationale to spend perhaps several hundred billion on an exclusive Earth-based energy factory or factories is hardly justifiable, but a much more cautious start to space colonization for the variety of reasons presented in this part 1 of this ebook makes the effort much more attractive. Here I attempt to lay out in basic terms a relatively modest proposal to permanently place humans in space. a presence with multi-purpose manufacturing and habitation colonies. I believe such prospect is likely to open up a Pandora's box of opportunities in space travel, energy manufacture, advancement, discovery, and who knows what else. Chapter 4: Discovery. We can easily forgive a child who is afraid of the dark. The real tragedy of life is when adults are afraid of the light. Plato. An important reason for establishing a presence in space, in addition to exploration and manufacture, is to push our intellectual limit. I believe this to be a human necessity, to keep our technical prowess alive and improving. In other words, we need to continue discovery for the betterment of mankind. Just as an animal becomes unable to thrive if removed from its wild habitat, surely the same awaits humanity if not provided with fresh challenges in learning. I believe that as a species, we have conquered most of the challenges of survival here on Earth, with few exceptions. And we have surpassed many social and technical problems, although many more need work. Nevertheless, space colonization would provide us with many more new challenges that would push our intellectual capacity towards virtual limit, and even help solve some problems that may have daunted us for ages. Examples of the problems we may learn to solve are cures for terminal diseases, surpass violent tendencies, and eradicate poverty and deprivation. Higher technology and the presence of large challenges have historically improved the quality of life of an increasing number of humans. Richard Zubrin, the famed scientist that founded the Mars Society, advocates the idea that without a new Apollo-like challenge, humans are doomed for intellectual decay. Examples of stagnations that may have contributed to civilization collapses are many, and include those that seemingly could not adapt to new challenges or provide new challenges for their peoples. Among such failed civilizations are the ancient empires of the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Romans, the Aztecs, the Mayans, just to name a few. These are traditionally considered failed civilizations because they broke up into different identities, or their populations were nearly exterminated by invaders, human or natural. Intellectual challenges can instigate tremendous advance in one or more fields. As examples of this phenomena, consider the following. 1. The Manhattan Project brought the benefit of the nuclear spacecrafts and nuclear power plants that we see today, in addition to the atom bomb, of course. 2. The Apollo space program, whose legacy extends to the latest Mars robotic missions. 3. World War II and World War I, and of course the Cold War, where many technologies were spawned or rapidly advanced, such as the airplane, the radio, radar, automobile, the computer, the internet, just to name a few. Historically, human struggles, pandemics, pollution, conflicts, and even energy crisis brought about intellectual challenges that led to the formulations of ways to combat problems. For example, the vaccination of polio, the banning of CFCs to protect the ozone layer, the social reforms of the 1960s here in the United States, and the development of alternative modes of energy to replace fossil fuels. Therefore, it seems that humans now and then need a little push, a jolt, to accomplish great things with some efficiency. It is not necessary nor desirable to create conflict or crisis like wars or pandemic to instigate technological advance. since peaceful and enthusiastic campaigns can accomplish similar or even greater feats. For example, the Apollo space program, what I will call here the ASP, was an effort driven by many factors, but President John F. Kennedy, JFK, instigated its inception and helped kick it started. The ASP's various initial drives were started with JFK's famous address to U.S. Congress in May of 1961 and the "We Choose to Go to the Moon" speech. Likewise, Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. instigated peaceful, intellectual, and social movements that required no violence or loss of life. The Gandhi and King movements released a menagerie of social improvements unlikely to have been brought about by war or other violence. The improvements and benefits of the discoveries that crisis-less efforts, such as the space colonization, could bring are virtually incalculable. For example, if space colonization is undertaken, countless new problems will push research and development to new heights, such as in medicine, construction, materials, development, engineering, air and space navigation, astronomy, and many other fields. So, discovery and the benefits new discoveries would bring are almost standalone reasons to go to space permanently and in the near future. But wait, there is more. Discovery is only one in several rationales to colonize space, each almost of equal stature, as you will find out in the next few chapters. Chapter 5: Assurance of Continued Human Survival and Expansion. Since in the long run, every planetary civilization will be endangered by impacts from space, every surviving civilization is obliged to become spacefaring, not because of exploratory or romantic zeal, but for the most practical reason imaginable: staying alive. Carl Sagan, 1994. I believe that as a species we must, if not soon then later, permanently migrate to space. Simply put, we must go to space to survive. I believe we are such a successful species at the game of survival and reproducing that these may be our long-term vulnerabilities. That is, there may be no tapering off in our urge to reproduce and exploit our environment. Figuratively speaking, like some snakes, we might end up eating our own tails. Seemingly nothing outside of ourselves can limit our growth as a species here on Earth. So many thousands of years into the future, Earth itself may not be sufficiently resourceful to quench our basic needs, let alone our wants. So before we even get close to such dire conditions, we must find a way to expand beyond Earth, and perhaps live where the resources are basically unlimited. And yes, there is such a place: space. It is true, it may be far into our future before Earth starts to become uninhabitable. This point needs little argument, but what needs argument is, when should we start taking meaningful steps to actually build the infrastructure necessary to get us to and live in space? If we can't get a sizable number of us into low Earth orbit now, there is little hope to venture out into extrasolar space when we really need to. Space colonization, regardless how far into our future, is at the core of a matter of survival and resource management of practical sense. Resource management that can take a solar system scale and not be limited to Earth. Overpopulation is another concern that is growing each minute. This is especially true in the third world and developing nations here on Earth. For example, the World Bank recognized the world total human population to be at over 7 billion as of the writing of this book, and could approach 9 billion by 2050. Beyond that year, our world population could continue to increase rapidly, a prospect that may present us with a grim future. The graph above, shown in page 25, shows the drastic human population growth, both projected and actual, since the mid-1700s on top and since 3000 BCE on the bottom graph. And more worrisome is the fact that as human population booms, many non-renewable resources will likely dwindle even faster. For example, fossil fuel or fossil oil, gas, metals, and mineral deposits. King Herbert proposed the following scenario for oil production through the year 2200, shown in the graph on page 26. So, in many years' time, perhaps not so many, we could find ourselves in a dire situation of severe overcrowding if no steps are taken to relieve the human overpopulation. Part of the solution is to have the capability and the technological and economic infrastructure already built to begin expansion into deep space. An example of how a small place can produce individuals far in excess of what that place can support is the following. Many individuals are born in small islands all over the world every year. And if not for migration out of these islands into larger, more resourceful lands, these islands would quickly become overcrowded and uninhabitable in as little as a few generations. In the future, migration into deep space would not be much different than migration from the small islands of today. Going to and living in deep space are two problems of the same broad idea of space colonization. For a large number of humans to go to space, there must be technologies to get them there. For example, rocket ships and other transports. And for many humans to live in space, there must be facilities already in place. Humans are high maintenance organisms, requiring much attention in many aspects. For example, we humans cannot remain in a passenger aircraft strapped to a seat for more than a few hours consecutively. Even during a short trip, the lack of movement is often uncomfortable, and even harmful. For a push such as space colonization, practical and comfortable transport technologies would need to be rapidly developed. These transport technologies would have to be of large enough size to accommodate large number of space-going peoples, which would satisfy the definition of space colonization. Additionally, the arrival and stay of these peoples living in living facilities would need to be built to comfortably support a human population and maintain their health and interests in all areas. Space transport and stay technologies need to be seriously and rapidly developed if and when deep space colonization takes place. For this mammoth effort, a long-term and resource-intensive investment would be necessary because of the scale of such project and its importance. I propose not to wait and to start to colonize space in the near future. Otherwise, we risk the uncertainties of a future without a large technological challenge. Not to mention the threat of growing resource, environmental, and human population problems. Deep space offers an unlimited amount of natural resources of raw materials and energy to feed and expand an unmeasurably larger human civilization. Today, I believe there is a dimly visible upper limit in our overall potential here on Earth. This is evident when considering the limited hard access and scarce resources of Earth. This trend will continue, where energy and resources will take larger amounts of energy and resources to obtain. Scarcity will only continue to grow and harm us as a species. Jack Fresco, the creator of a new social system that utilizes the Earth's resources intelligently, the Venus Project, advocates this point. Fresco also agrees that scarcity creates abhorrent human behaviors like abuse, jealousy, greed, and hatred. Fresco's approach recognizes that his system is dependent on the finite Earth's accessible resources, and that migration into space will eventually be more feasible if we better manage the Earth resources today. Richard Zubrin strongly advocates the human mind must always remain at the frontier of knowledge to remain sane and relevant. And Zubrin believes that frontier is vast vanishing here on Earth. In Zubrin's available media, he seems to imply, and I agree, that Mars should be the next target for that human frontier, both to prevent intellectual stagnation and bring about changes that will surely aid mankind on Mars and Earth. So, both Fresco and Zubrin seem to recognize the need of resources for humanity to remain healthy and to expand. Most scholars surely recognize that Earth's resources are finite, and many scientists recognize they are more finite than previously thought. In summary, I believe that with dwindling Earth resources, runaway population growth, and natural and man-made catastrophes, mankind must look elsewhere while trying to minimize and repair problems here on Earth. So, our survivability is a real concern, however remote, which should urge humans to begin seriously planning and building space colonies. Why wait for the storm to approach? By then, it may be too late to begin to evacuate. After all, there must be a destination for us to evacuate to, and we must be able to get there. Chapter 6: The Unknown, Discovery, and Possibility. Little discussed reasons for going to space on a permanent basis are there still unknown discoveries and advantages that are surely to be found along the journey of space colonization. These may be little discussed because, well, we do not know much about them. But if past experiences have any to teach us, our possibilities in space colonization should be thoroughly studied and weighed for options before any commitments are made. In my view, going to deep space permanently for the benefit of yet to be found benefits should be on any list of reasons to finally decide to colonize space. Chapter 7: Other Life in Space. As of the writing of this eBook, we have not found the smallest conclusive trace of past or current life on any world outside of Earth. However, we have found life in many places where we previously thought life could not persist. On Earth, extremophiles, organisms so tough that they can survive extreme heat, cold, and even airless environments like space, have been found. So, our definition of life supporting habitats have changed. We also have found a Martian rock here on Earth, which contained inconclusive but compelling evidence of possible past life on Mars. For these and many other reasons, scientific and wishful have driven a large group of our species to conduct a painstaking search for life in other worlds. Missions to Mars aimed to search for life and other things outnumber the same type of missions to any other place in our solar system by many folds. And since the 1970s, using robotic craft and rovers have landed on the surface of Mars many times more than any other celestial body. Arguably, all of the Mars landings have had as a principal goal the search for evidence or conditions that may support life. Why? Well, part of the reason may lie in our deepest yearnings and nature as humans. Space is big, really big, and we humans are relatively tiny, even when looked as a whole planet community. So, we naturally would find comfort in, I think, on not being alone in this great vastness called the universe. Also, we tirelessly look for that intellectual challenge spoken of in an earlier chapter. But more importantly, finding life or evidence of it would open up a Pandora's box of other problems, implications, questions, and all. And these, many of us humans cannot wait to bring about. There's also a perspective that we yearn to answer. If life is found in another world and separate in origin from Earth, from life on Earth, then how many other worlds may harbor it? How different and alike might it be? And if so, how did it come about? If ever found, other life need not be advanced, intelligent, conscious, or Earth-like. So our very definition of life may be changed by such discovery. It is difficult, I am certain, to define life here on Earth with much accuracy. For example, a layperson in biology would have trouble picking out life in countless variety of species here on Earth. From virtually motionless organisms in the bottom of shallow seas and forests to microscopic varieties only normally seen when packed in the millions. If green movement, eyes, a brain, or even a heartbeat does not define life, then what does? These are difficult questions to answer here on Earth, let alone on an alien world. But although space explorers currently look for life through a narrow view, this view may quickly be widened by the colonization of space and deep space travel. So, the search for life and the improved chances of finding it, past or present, are an important part of a body of reasons to colonize space. Chapter 8: Power from Space. In the mid-1970s, Gerard O'Neill and a group of other NASA scientists proposed building gigantic Earth-orbiting human colonies for the primary and initial purpose of building space-based power plants, or power satellites, PowerSats for short. These ambitious proposals stemmed, at least in large part, from the recent oil and gas and energy crisis triggered by the Arabic oil embargo of 1972. At least for now, there are affordable oil products in the US and many other countries, and there are many other options for energy. For example, domestically pumped and refined oil, nuclear, wind, geothermal, and photovoltaic power. So, building space colonies for the primary purpose of supplying energy to Earth in mass scale is today hardly justifiable. In the mid-1970s, O'Neill and colleagues did not envision the proliferation of solar energy that we have today, and remained convinced that solar light concentrators were the best type of solar energy harvesting method. Photovoltaic power generation in space is a proven technology that has been used since the days of Skylab in the mid-1970s. Photovoltaic power generation is the production of electricity from sunlight using special solar cells. Additionally, solar cell production has proliferated since the mid-2000s for widespread Earth-based use and has traditionally been a primary source of power for most space satellites and the space stations. Energy production from solar light concentrators, photovoltaics, and the possible access to deposits of coal, gas, and other fuels is a top reason for space colonization for obvious benefits. From an Earth perspective, it is hard to appreciate the amount of power that could be potentially produced in deep space. Gigantic solar arrays assembled on Earth orbit could receive many times the amount of solar energy of ground-based systems. Plus, the cold nature of the vacuum of space allows for much better efficiencies and electrical conductivity. The way to transmit power back to Earth from arrays on Earth orbit is a technology that exists now and only needs further development. Wireless power transmission has been a reality here on Earth for many decades, as a radio and microwave wireless power is routinely used by commercial, public, and military industries the world over. High power and efficient wireless microwave electricity transmission through the long distances between the Earth's surface and Earth orbit are thought to be a technical possibility by a number of experts, and the high power space wireless transmission technology's rapid development would make space-based solar power plants an important reason to build a permanent space colony. Although power production would not be, by a long shot, a sole reason for space colonization, it is a primary prerequisite for any spacefaring civilization. Further into deep space, like the Moon and the moons of other planets such as Jupiter and Saturn, and asteroids and planets, there are open doors for vast energy resources like high-grade methane gas, alcohol, and hydrogen. But technologies to reach those energy taps and efficiently exploit them can almost exclusively be accomplished through such permanent and advanced space structures as orbiting space colonies. Lastly, to achieve such levels of technology as to exploit the solar system's energy resources outside of Earth's orbit requires a spacefaring civilization able to move vast amounts of material through millions of kilometers of space. A civilization that could start with the building of relatively modest startup space colonies in the very near future. Power generation in space could take a non-solar route. Extraction of fuels from asteroids, moons, and perhaps other solar systems. Extraction of liquids and gases from other worlds, like the Saturnian moon Titan, is a fuzzy but visible possibility. Titan and other worlds have vast amounts of methane and other energetic gases. Many metals, precious liquids, and gases also exist in a countless number of asteroids in our solar system alone. However tantalizing reaching, extracting, and bringing any of these energy materials back to Earth this is still unfeasible. A round trip with current rocket power would cost far more than the small amount of material brought back from Earth brought back for Earth use. Nevertheless, orbiting colonies would change the game. Since they don't have to come back, to Earth and attempt to make a profit on gathered fuels, space colonies can use gathered energy resources locally, expand, and keep moving if desired. For example, a space colony can travel to Titan and orbit the moon as long as necessary, quenching perhaps most of their energy needs with the moon's vast resources. The same could occur in orbits around the large asteroids and even planets like Mars. In short, space power generation will be a necessity to maintain space colonies and any deep space program on Earth or on any other solar world. Space power generation is an important reason to go for and maintain a permanent presence in space, as only space-based crews can build an orbiting power plant in the scales discussed here. Power generation from the sun should remain a number one reason on the list of any space power project, as it is readily abundant to the orbit of the asteroid belt, and technologies exist for its harnessing today. The collection of liquids and gases from space are yet to be made feasible if the goal is to import to Earth, but with the advent of orbiting colonies, local use of any available energy resources would make tapping into an energy-full world a feasible and awesome prospect. Chapter 9: Human Evolution in Space. Space exploration should be considered primarily as a biological thrust outward for the human species, and not just another step toward making life easier through a speed bump in technology. Ward J. Haas, 1996. A tantalizing and awesome prospect, and in my mind a great reason to begin the colonization of space now, is the eventual and likely evolution of the human race into a galactic species, the Cosmosians, dwellers of the cosmos. On Earth, organisms' evolution is driven by environmental demands, sexual selection, and genetic pressures, mutations, over relatively long periods of time. Although sometimes at the microscopic level, evolution happens in matters of hours or even minutes. Likewise, given generations of inhabiting space, humans may evolve to forms hardly familiar to us now. Obviously, humans who permanently inhabit space will be under significantly different environmental pressures than Earth-based humans, and over many generations, the human genome will begin to respond to those vastly different pressures. This change may take place in small part by natural selection, according to the demands of the space environments in the colonies, and largely according to artificial and sexual selection, depending on the emerging space colony's culture. For example, the lesser or non-existent gravity of many space environments will likely drive the preference of those humans less prone to bone and muscle cell loss and those that have less health complications in general. And mates may begin to prefer partners with those traits too, which will drive a change in overall human looks. So far, space environment health has not been a driver in astronaut selection, since we do selections here on Earth. Only excellent health on Earth has been used to qualify astronauts, among other factors. Good Earth health usually translates to better health in space, and today astronauts are selected for short missions and not to produce the next generation of astronauts. In time, perhaps smaller humans with high muscle and bone densities would become more numerous and thrive in most colony environments. If that trend continues, I envision stocky adult humans, the size of 10-year-old Earth children. If the use of the arms are increased for movement in zero gravity and the use of the legs is diminished, humans with longer arms will be preferred by the emerging culture, thus likely increasing in number. Eventually, muscle-packed, long-armed, short, weak-legged humans would dominate, whose skeleton may resemble the right one on the illustration below shown in page 41. Space colonies may achieve Earth levels of gravity, but even if this level of artificial gravity is achieved, it would be minimized for a large number of humans, often exposed to low gravity environments. Manufacturing jobs and movement to and from colonies would be in zero or low gravity environments. And recall the 1975 summer study. Technically, a civilization without gravity would surpass the one with gravity. Also, Moon and Mars bases would have only a fraction of the Earth's gravity. Additionally, in the future space civilizations, persons may be selected for certain tasks and living environments, even before growing up to be adults or born, more or less grown, to serve certain needs of the colony. Although this sounds like labor bondage, it is likely to be a necessity of advanced future societies, thus accepted as ethical. It is worth mentioning that extreme dependence on technology would likely drive human evolution on a significantly different route than the one depicted here. Microgravity will not be the only factor to drive human evolution in space. A repertoire of other pressures will almost definitely change the human's physiology and psychology. The following are but a few of the factors that may drive rapid evolution in the human space populations, and could begin to be noticed in as little as tens of generations. Higher gravity, as in larger worlds or through artificial gravity, higher or lower radiation levels, significantly higher or lower habitation densities, crowding, higher or lower levels of psychological stress, and surely many other factors. There are a few studies out that predict the fate of human looks in the future. One was conducted by researcher Nikolai Lon, 2013, as seen in the illustrations here below shown in page 42. Above is a depiction of humans 100,000 years in the future using an advanced computer program by artists and researchers Nikolai Lamb and Alan Quam. Lamb and Quam argue that the trend for larger foreheads, smaller facial features, darker skin, and larger eyes will persist as we colonize deep space. Larger eyes will be necessary in the dimmer environments of deep space, and more pigmented skin will be useful for higher UV exposures in space. Other experts like Dr. Oliver Curry argue that Earth humans' evolution will almost entirely be driven by sexual selection, where mates will select each other depending mostly on their looks, thus be almost completely removed from natural selection. So height and body features will be pronounced. However, Dr. Curry says that trend will begin to cease about 3,000 years into our future, when mostly technology pressures will drive our evolution. Dr. Curry envisions humans to break off into at least two different and separate species, both living simultaneously but with vastly different purposes. The one with more pronounced features, an elite class, and one with diminished features, a lower class, as the last two persons depicted on the picture above in page 43. Page 44 shows my depiction, the author's depiction of how a group of humans may evolve in far future low gravity environments. The depicted are perhaps a working class of humans that would be dedicated almost entirely to the manufacture of goods in zero gravity. Again, evolution may take different routes if technology is relied upon completely or to perform work. In my depiction of possible human evolution, the trend for larger brains and eyes continues, as well as the shortening of legs for non-use, and the lengthening of and strengthening of the arms and hands, as they will be increasingly needed for both moving and to work. Bone density and muscle density is high enough to offset the low gravity. My proposed evolutionary path assumes the space colonization culture closely follows health and necessity demands of space environments. In short, the mind-boggling prospect of dramatic changes in the human mind and body are, in my view, towering reasons for us to begin to establish a permanent presence in space. Not so much for the thrill to witness the birth of a new species, but for the possibility of reaching further out into the stars with more assurance through our increased capabilities to thrive in space. Chapter 10. The closing of Part 1. I believe we must work toward living in space because eventually space must be our destination for both survival and advancement. Whatever our purpose, if a space habitat were established, space may provide us with the opportunity to continue our search. A search for what, you may ask? Well, take your pick. And whatever thing or topic you choose, it can surely use advancement or development. And advancement and development is what space colonization is all about. If not my arguments, perhaps those big names will bring some credit to space colonization. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, one of the pioneers thinkers of modern space exploration, once said, "The Earth is the cradle of mankind, but one cannot remain in the cradle forever." Carl Sagan, an immensely influential American scientist, supported the exploration of other worlds, although with cautious, methodical, and gradual steps toward colonization and responsible manipulation of inhabited worlds. Also, Richard Zubrin, another influential American scientist, advocates the colonization of Mars to prevent what he calls intellectual stagnation here on Earth. These and many other great persons, including non-scientists, as you will see in later chapters, support the idea of extending humans' reach and life beyond Earth. The reasons are almost as varied as the people that support space exploration. So where do I start? Well, as covered in Part 1 of this ebook, discovery, survival, the unknown, power, other life, and evolution are my most pressing reasons for colonizing space. But there are many more. Many people oppose the view of space colonization as too dreamy, far ahead, or even absurd. Those who are against space exploration may argue that we have too many unsolved problems here on Earth to fund a space program, let alone consider establishing human habitats outside of Earth. But is there hope all problems will ever be solved for us to afford to put off advance in space? And if not for space, why spend billions as a nation on continuous entertainment or fancy military armament? Ultimately, a happy medium between space exploration and Earth investments must be reached, and advance in many human dilemmas must continue. Plus, most of the space enterprises ever undertaken had some benefit for Earth as their mission and or outcome. And lastly, who decides where that happy medium is between Earth and space? As Carl Sagan once put it, who speaks for Earth? The slowly emerging permanent human presence in space I advocate that does not include sending a group of humans to outer space for them to never come back to Earth. It would be more like an increasing permanent presence with an initial steady cycling of a group of humans in and out of Earth orbit, much like workers who go into a factory on a daily basis for years or decades. So can a group of cosmosians, dwellers of the cosmos, to be sent for 2 or 4 weeks tours. For example, space colonization can start with longer term tours to an orbiting manufacturing plant or a habitat using affordable transport systems that go to and from space on a regular basis, perhaps daily. This would be an initial phase that would later allow actual permanent habitation on space to deep solar system voyages, and even moves to other star systems. Then, we would become true cosmosians. We have put forth a few reasons for us to begin to colonize space, and have not attempted to delve into the details of how to, when, and who would go, as I believe that any action needs a rationale, and rationale needs education, thus the purpose of this simple ebook. We must go to prepare for bigger and better baby steps to the stars, for the discovery, for our survival, for the unknown, for other possible life, for energy, and for our evolution and chances to reach beyond the stars. Although we may not win a Pulitzer Prize, this ebook is hopefully a start, a spark, a gate for the interested and wondrous mind. Hope you enjoyed it and find yourself as enthusiastic as I am about our prospects in space. Chapter 11. Preview of Part 2. The planned Part 2 of this ebook will delve into the technologies that may get us to deep space affordably, and the technologies that will allow us to live there sustainably. By no means are the technologies presented my or any one man's making. So far, cheap and reliable systems to access space have eluded engineers for many years, but propositions and plans available to admire the possibilities. The now retired Space Shuttle never accomplished the wished for cheap access to space, and current rocket-based systems appear unlikely to achieve this either. So, what are our options as far as the body of research shows? To access space affordably, reliably, and consistently? This question will be the thesis of the next part of this book.